Nature has built almost everything you could possibly imagine. I mean, we share our planet with fish that literally generate their own electricity, lizards that shoot blood out of their eyes, and jellyfish that, technically speaking, never have to die. But there is this one ultimate biological mystery, a creature that nature simply flat out refused to build. Yet somehow human beings went ahead and invented it anyway. We call it a dragon. Today, we're going to explore exactly why biology absolutely forbade this magnificent beast and the deeply fascinating, maybe even a little unsettling reason why it lives inside our heads instead. Ultimately, it brings up a wild question. What if we were not alive? Would the idea of a dragon exist anywhere in the universe at all?
So, think about the classic Western dragon for a second. You're probably picturing a giant, winged reptile breathing fire, right? Now zoom out with me. Look at the monsters dreamed up by completely disconnected cultures that never touched, never traded, never even communicated with each other. We see a serpent dragon winding through ancient China, a feathered snake god over in the Americas, a rainbow serpent in Australia, and your classic fire-breathing lizard in medieval Europe. Sure, the minor details shift depending on the geography, but underneath the hood, people all over the globe kept reaching for the exact same handful of mythological parts: the scales and bulk of a giant reptile, the coiling body of a snake, the raw menace of an apex predator. How on earth did evolution, with 4 billion years and an entire planet to work with, never produce one, while totally isolated human societies invented the exact same monster from scratch over and over again?
Now, what's really interesting about this is that nature actually got surprisingly close to the absolute craziest part of a dragon, the fire. Take the bombardier beetle. When this little guy is threatened, it mixes two specific chemicals inside a tiny armored chamber right in its abdomen: hydrogen peroxide and hydroquinone. The resulting chemical reaction is so incredibly violent that it heats the liquid to nearly 212 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the temperature of boiling water, and it blasts it out with a loud pop. It can actually swivel, aim, and fire this boiling spray up to 20 times in a row. It's basically nature's closest attempt at a literal flamethrower. But it's still just boiling spray. It isn't a flame. In fact, no animal we know of has ever evolved a biological mechanism to literally set something on fire. Nature flatly refused to sign off on the dragon's most famous feature. Okay, but what about the body? Well, nature absolutely nailed the body. Today we've got the Komodo dragon, which is an impressive, venomous 10-foot lizard. But honestly, the Komodo is just a leftover. Until about 50,000 years ago, Australia was home to an extinct monitor lizard called Megalonea, and its size was just staggering. Megalonea could reach up to 23 feet long. Just imagine a highly venomous, predatory reptile that is literally longer than your car. And the wildest part? The first early humans who reached Australia very likely shared the land with it, living side by side. It wasn't a mythical dragon for sure, but it was absolutely a real reptile, big enough and terrifying enough to easily pass for one. And then, there's the flight. If you're sitting there wondering if a massive reptile could ever realistically take to the skies, the answer is a resounding yes. In the twilight of the dinosaurs, roughly 68 million years ago, the sky belonged to Quetzalcoatlus. Just wrap your head around its wingspan, 36 feet across. We are talking about a flying reptile that weighed around 550 pounds. When it folded those massive wings and stood on the ground, it was as tall as a modern-day giraffe. To actually get into the air, this living, breathing creature, the size of a small airplane, mind you, literally pole vaulted off its own arms into the sky. A giraffe-sized reptile really did fly.
So the crucial point is, every single piece of a dragon already exists or used to exist out there in the wild. Nature built the giant reptile body. Nature built the colossal reptilian wings. Heck, it even built animals that fly using makeshift parts right now, like the Draco lizard over in Southeast Asia, which literally stretches its own ribs out to the sides to act like a folding fan, letting it glide 200 feet from tree to tree. The pieces are totally real. But despite all these incredible modular parts existing in the wild, the final assembly is strictly forbidden. Nature never, ever allowed one animal to have all these spectacular traits at the exact same time. And this isn't just a matter of bad luck or a roll of the dice. There are absolute, hard scientific reasons why.
The first massive roadblock is literally hiding in plain sight. Think of the classic dragon, like the one you see on the Welsh flag. It has 4 legs and 2 wings. Well, do the math. That equals 6 limbs. But biology operates on a very strict 4-limb rule. Every single animal with a backbone, you, a bird, a snake, a blue whale, a T-Rex, traces its lineage back to the same 4-limbed fish that first crawled out of the ancient waters over 350 million years ago. 4 limbs is the biological starting kit, and nobody has ever been handed a spare pair. When bats or birds or giant pterosaurs evolved the ability to fly, they didn't magically sprout extra arms. They had to sacrifice their front legs and completely rebuild them into wings. That is exactly why the Draco lizard has to glide using its ribs. A six-limbed dragon breaks a fundamental biological law that is held completely firm for hundreds of millions of years. And a dragon isn't just blocked by that one rule, it faces three massive biological roadblocks stacked right on top of each other. We just covered the four-limb rule. Next up is size limits. Physics dictates that if you make an animal twice as long, it becomes roughly 8 times as heavy, but its bones and muscles only get about 4 times stronger. Quetzalcoatlus was already scraping the absolute physical ceiling for flight. A dragon the size of a house wouldn't majestically take to the sky, it would just be a pile of snapped bones crushed by its own sheer weight. And finally, you have the metabolic cost. Flying is arguably the most energetically expensive thing a body can do. It pushes oxygen and calorie burning to the absolute brink. There's quite simply zero energy left in that biological budget to also run a roaring chemical furnace in the animal's chest. Evolution doesn't plan ahead to build a cool monster, it just tinkers with what's already there. And no chain of tiny accidental evolutionary steps could ever stumble into a winged, six-limbed, self-igniting, house-sized reptile. So, we've established the hard scientific truth here. A dragon is thoroughly, comprehensively forbidden by the laws of biology, chemistry, and physics. Yet, returning to our central mystery, why did humanity collectively insist on inventing it anyway? If you can't find this creature anywhere in the wild, where did the blueprint come from? Why did people across entirely different continents, speaking completely different languages, all pick up a carving tool or a pen and sketch out the exact same impossible beast? Well, there are 2 leading ideas that solve this mystery.
The first big idea is grounded right in the dirt, the bone diggers. Long before the word dinosaur was ever even uttered, ancient people were out there digging enormous, completely unexplainable fossils out of the ground. Adrian Meyer, a brilliant historian at Stanford, tracked down one of these fascinating cases. Thousands of years ago, Scythian gold miners traveling across the harsh, desolate Gobi Desert kept unearthing these bizarre skeletons of a beaked four-legged dinosaur we now know as Protoceratops. Without any modern concept of extinction to fall back on, their minds rationally rebuilt those bones into a terrifying guardian beast, and boom, that birthed the legend of the griffin. And on the exact opposite side of the world, over in China, colossal fossils were being unearthed, ground down into traditional medicine, and literally branded as dragon bones. Humanity found these giant, impossible puzzle pieces in the dirt, and we invented monsters just to make sense of them.
But there's a second idea, and I'll warn you, this one is much darker and incredibly profound. It suggests that the answer to the dragon mystery isn't hiding in the dirt at all, and it honestly isn't even about the animals. It's about you. It's about what is literally hardwired inside the human brain. This theory comes from an anthropologist named David E. Jones, and to really grasp it, we have to look back millions of years into our own evolutionary past. Long before we were walking upright, we have to look at the things that used to hunt us in the dark.
To get this, we have to look at monkeys, specifically vervet monkeys. Jones noticed something uniquely strange about them. They don't just have one generic scream when they get scared. No, they have 3 distinct, highly specific alarm calls. 3 unique screams for 3 very specific killers. One alarm strictly warns the troop about big cats prowling on the ground. Another is exclusively for an eagle diving in from above. And the last scream strictly means snake. Just let that sink in. The great cat, the eagle, and the snake. These are the exact 3 apex predators that relentlessly hunted primates like us. Think about it. What if we were not alive, constantly scanning the tall grass and the open skies, just desperately trying to survive? If our early ancestors hadn't lived through that terror, these specific fears would have never been recorded in our DNA. They are our oldest mortal enemies.
And this brilliantly illustrates David E. Jones's explosive theory. When you fuse these primal fears together, it all takes shape. The absolute terror of these 3 specific predators got burned so deeply into the primate brain over millions and millions of years of desperate survival that over time, human psychology simply melted them together into one single ultimate nightmare image. Just think about the anatomy for a second. You take the terrifying fangs and the raking claws of the great cat. You bolt on the massive wings and the killing dive of the eagle. And then you wrap that whole assembly inside the long, coiling, scaled body of the snake. When you stitch those 3 mortal enemies together into one frame, you haven't just made a monster, you have perfectly built a dragon.
Now, while some folks argue this theory reaches a little bit far, mostly because, you can't physically dig an instinct out of the ground to prove it, it profoundly explains the one thing the scattered fossils cannot. It explains why we didn't just invent a bunch of random monsters, but why we kept inventing this exact one. The exact same parts, bolted together in the exact same way on every single continent by ancient peoples who had never once spoken to each other. The dragon was never an animal wandering the wild. It was an instinct. Honestly, it goes right back to that thought, what if we were not alive? If our ancestors weren't there to be hunted by these predators, the dragon simply would not exist anywhere in the universe. The actual assembly didn't happen in nature, it happened entirely inside the human mind.
Nature never actually made a dragon. We did. Which leaves us with this final, fascinating question to carry with you today. Is the greatest mythical beast in human history actually just the shape of your ancestors' nightmares? A ghost image stitched together from everything that used to hunt us in the dark? It kind of proves that dragons are real, but they only exist because we are alive to remember them.
Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this sparked your curiosity, and I'll catch you next time.